At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about what you've done with those accomplishments. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back. Denzel Washington. Welcome to Inspire Vision. Our sole purpose is to elevate the lives of others and to inspire you to do the same.
Terry Whalin, welcome to the show.
Dr. Doug, great here to be with you.
Hey, I'm really pleased to have you here. This, as I've mentioned, this is kind of going to be a different topic than normally what we cover. But what I find interesting is that you're really focused on authors and helping them to write books and so on and so forth. You've written a very fascinating book. What I'd love for you to do is kind of share with the audience who you are, your background, and what brought you to the point where you wrote your latest book, which happens to be about the myths of writing a book.
Yeah, I got interested in writing when I was in high school. I was the editor of my high school newspaper. I went to Indiana University, which is a top 10 journalism school. I thought I really had the right stuff, to be a writer. I joined the campus newspaper, and I think we produced, there were about 100 of us on the writing staff. We produced a full-size newspaper 6 days a week. And I think I rewrote my first story for that newspaper about 4 times, and it didn't even have my name on it. It was just a little paragraph when it finally appeared. And I thought that's what I was going to do. I thought I was going to be a newspaper reporter. That's what I studied. And but about halfway through my sophomore year, I was sitting there at my old Royal typewriter, banging out my story, and I couldn't get my fingers on the right keys. And I kept saying to myself, muttering to myself, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. And this little blonde-haired girl that was sitting beside me, she said, "Oh, Terry, don't say that, because one of these days when you really need Jesus, you'll call out for him and he won't be there."
I love that.
I thought, what is this? I'm a Christian. I go to church when I'm at home. I read the Bible in church when I'm at home. Doug, I knew nothing about all that. And so she sent me down to this little bookstore a couple blocks off the Indiana campus and said they had pretty cards and posters and maybe I'd find a book that interested me. So I wandered down there a couple of days later and I bought this book called Jesus the Revolutionary. I thought, how in the world could Jesus be a revolutionary? And I read that book and it showed me a different side of Jesus than I'd ever seen before. And about that time, some people invited me to a Jesus People gathering in downtown Bloomington. They were sitting on little scraps of carpets with little candles. And those people had something that I didn't have. And so much to the amusement of my college colleagues, instead of becoming a newspaper journalist, I joined a group called Wycliffe Bible Translators that works in different countries around the world. And I worked in Guatemala, Central America, among the Southwest Kaqchikel people. I spent 10 years of my life in linguistics. And then I kind of wandered back to my writing. I started writing for magazine articles. I've written more than 50 magazines. I had my first book published in 1992. I've actually written more than 60 books for traditional publishers. So I've written all kinds of stuff, children's books, biographies, how-tos, all kinds of things. And then a number of years ago, I had the opportunity to actually work inside a publishing company. And so I'm currently working as an acquisitions editor in my third publisher. So I've worked with hundreds of authors over the years to get their books contracted, published into the bookstore. And so now I wrote this book that you called 10 Publishing Myths, because I hear all these crazy, they're not crazy, but they're really unrealistic expectations that authors have about their books, what they're going to do, what they're going to succeed. And so much of the publishing process is, from what I've learned from writing them as well as helping other people publish them, so much of the publishing process is totally outside of our control of anything that we as authors can do. And so I wrote this book to try to help authors have realistic expectations, but also understand that there are some actions that they can take to really help themselves and get their book out there into the market.
Well, and as I mentioned to you, as we were communicating back and forth, I've written one book, and I'm going to tell a story and be very transparent about this. So I was really focusing a number of years ago on small businesses. I have a background. I was a dentist. I went back to business school. And ultimately, I started working with very small businesses and doing coaching and that type of thing. And as I was in various groups, one of the networking groups, they started talking about how valuable it was to have a book that you've written. And obviously, they had a group that said, hey, come in, you go write one chapter, we'll make it a best-selling book on Amazon, and all of a sudden you can say I'm a best-selling author, which I did, and I wrote the chapter and so on and so forth, and they put it on Amazon and it became a best-selling, whatever that means. And you can talk about that myth, by the way. And that was fine. And, the whole purpose for me was just, someone said, if you're a best-selling author, it's going to boost your credibility a bit. And so I think there's a lot of people that do that. And quite frankly, I would say 95% of the people that I interview on my podcast, and I've done now, over 320, 340 podcasts, most of them are authors. And for whatever reason, I've read some of their books, and some of them are just really quite good. And other ones, it's like, okay, I stopped after the first chapter or two. and so I'm fascinated by this topic because I think, there are going to be people that are listening that maybe have never written a book. There are people that want to write a book, and maybe people will be inspired to write a book. But the bottom line is you're right. There are so many myths about writing a book. And so let's talk about each one of those. And, I guess initially, what do you find are the real reasons that people write books? And I know that there are a number of them. And what did you find some of the myths are relative to why?
Yeah, I think people write books for all kinds of reasons, but a lot of times it is a really good idea to write a book because it gives you the authority. You're an expert in your area if you've written a book. So I think it is a valuable thing for people to do. It opens up doors of opportunities for you to be like on this podcast, on radio shows, to speak places, because you're a book author. People are really interested in that. But you have to be sort of realistic about what's going to actually happen with that book, and that's part of what I was doing. But one of the big myths, for example, that people think is that they think they're going to make a lot of money when they write a book, is one of the expectations that people have, and I see this over and over. But yet they publish with a publisher that's has no real interest in helping them be a best-selling author. I mean, I see that all the time with authors. They're hooked into some publisher that maybe publishes 20,000 books that year, and they're all online. And so they just really don't get educated about who that publisher is and why in the world they should even publish with them. They just sort of get hooked into somebody and then give them some money and think they're going to have a best-selling book. And it's a lot more complicated than that at the end of the day.
Well, and again, like I say, I think people have different reasons for wanting to write a book. Like, for instance, when I wrote the book initially, I mean, I wrote a chapter. So it was, there were 5 of us that wrote the book, and I wrote a chapter, and the topic was really important to me. And I felt really great about it, and it turned out really good, the chapter. But for me, the purpose was to develop, as you had just mentioned, maybe a little bit more credibility of what I was doing. And yet I recognized that all of a sudden the publisher was Amazon. It went on to Amazon, and, I don't know how the company did it, but obviously they got enough people to go in and like it that it became best-selling. what are your thoughts, first of all, about Amazon? And what, is that for people that are just looking for credibility, is that a good place to go versus looking for a really valid publisher? If your whole purpose really, I made no money. If your whole purpose is not really to make money, but to build credibility, what's your views on Amazon?
I think Amazon is an okay place, but at Morgan James, for example, we've been in business for 20 years. We've produced over 6,000 titles, 29 times New York Times bestseller list, over 200 times on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list. Amazon is a big customer of Morgan James, but we try to teach our authors not to use that word Amazon, because for booksellers, you can imagine out there, Doug, that's like a terrible word. They hate Amazon because from their perspective, from a bookstore owner perspective, Amazon has destroyed their business over the years. And so they don't really care that you're an Amazon bestseller. Now, if you're a best-selling author, they care about that, but they don't care that you're an Amazon bestseller. So we try to teach authors not to use that word. So if you've got 50 reviews, you want to say you've got 50 five-star reviews, not that you have 50 Amazon reviews. So that makes a difference as to how people perceive that line that you're giving them. So those are just kind of some of the simple things that we try to do to really help our authors. I mean, our books, we sell our books into 98% of the bookstores in North America, including the brick and mortar stores. So, we sell at Target.com. So we're selling our books all over the place. So take a serious look at that. How can your publisher help you? That's one of the ways, by getting the book out there broadly into those different venues.
Well, and if you're going with a publisher such as whom you represent at this point in time, can you consider maybe even making money, or why write a book? What are the main reasons then to write the book? And is there actually a way to make money off of that book or not?
Yeah, there's a way to make money. You just have to sometimes you have to be patient as far as how that book sells. I mean, a lot of New York publishers will give you 6 months, and then if the book doesn't sell, they put the book out of print, destroy the books. So that didn't help you very much if you do that kind of system. So we try to be patient. We realize that sometimes it takes a year or 2 years or something for that book to really catch on out there and then succeed. So yes, you can make money on your book, but it takes effort on the author's part in order to be able to do that. My real wake up moment, Dr. Doug, on this was in 2007. I was a literary agent at that point. I was running a little literary agency in Scottsdale, Arizona. And Mark Victor Hansen, the co-author on Chicken Soup for the Soul, invited me to come to Los Angeles. He was having this book called Mega Book Marketing University. And so I went out there. I took pitches from authors during the event, but I also sat there with everybody else. There were over 400 people that were there, and they had all these speakers. And at that point in my life, I'd written about 50 books for traditional publishers. So publishers were making books for me. They were giving me advances. They were putting the books in the bookstore. All that kind of thing was happening. But once a year or maybe quarterly, publishers send you a financial statement about how your book is doing. And mine were all in the minus category. None of my books were making money. And so I really didn't know what I was doing wrong in that whole process. But during this seminar, it was almost like I woke up and realized what my issue was. One of the speakers that was there was Jack Canfield, the other co-author on Chicken Soup for the Soul. And Jack has written this book called The Success Principles. In that book, he talks about what does it take to really be successful. The very first success principle says that I will take 100% responsibility for my own success. Now, none of us want to take 100% responsibility. We want somebody else to do it. We want our publisher, our marketing person, somebody else, please, other than us. But I realized how little I was actually doing to promote my own book. Sure, I had a terrywhalin.com website, but I really wasn't doing radio or podcasting or blogging or anything really to be telling people. So I decided during that event that I was going to take 100% responsibility for my own success. So I started a blog. My blog started in 2004, but I have over 1,700 entries in my blog now. About a year ago, I found an article saying that I was one of the top 27 content producers out there, along with Seth Godin and Ryan Holiday and Jeff Goins, people like that. It's because of this volume of material that I have out there, and that I've been blogging every week. I write an article, I put it out there on my blog. I started in social media when that came along. So I have over 175,000 followers on X, Twitter. I have 19,500 connections on LinkedIn. So I really started to do my part to get my books out there into the market, and my whole financial situation with my books changed from that result. I mean, people forget, even with those Chicken Soup for the Soul books, Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen, they got rejected over 160 times before they finally found somebody to publish that book. They finally found a publisher, a little publisher in Florida, to publish those books. And they told their publisher they were going to sell 1 million books in the first year. Publisher laughed at them. They never sold 1 million copies of anything at that point in their life. But I'll tell you, Dr. Doug, it took them 1.5 years to sell their first 1 million books. But those guys practiced what they call the rule of 5. So they got up every day and they did 5 things to tell people about their book. They did a magazine article, a book signing, a guest blog post, a radio show, something every 5 times every day to tell people about their book. So that's why they were able to sell 1 million books in the first 1.5 years after those books launched. And now those books are some of the most successful out there because they actually took action as an author and did something to be telling people about their book.
Well, and I find that as I've interviewed a number of different people talking about personal development and really trying to reach some purposes and goals in your life and feeling better about what's going on, one of the things they talk about is journaling. And, we talk about meditation, we talk about, somatic stuff and everything, but one of the things that always keeps coming up is journaling. And so I think for people that are doing that, what have you found personally? And I know this is a strange question, but you literally have journaled your whole life. Only you're writing the books, you're publishing and so forth. But have you found that by doing that, it's made a difference for you in your own personal life because of the fact that you are writing?
Yeah, I think there is something to journaling. In some ways, my blog is a type of journal in a sense, because I capture my stories about working with different people in publishing. But that experience of writing over and over is something that's very important. And a lot of people think that they can't be a writer unless they publish a book. And that's another one of my myths because it's a lot of work to do a book. I freely admit that. I mean, a 50 to 100,000 word book takes a lot of time and energy to get that done and get that out there properly and everything. I encourage people to still write for magazines. That's why I've written for more than 50 magazines, and you can work with a shorter piece of writing if you do that. Magazine writing is great because you learn a lot as a writer about that process, and you'll reach more people probably than you ever will with your book. I mean, if your book sells 5,000 copies during the life of the book, that's a good number for you to have done that. With a magazine article, it's very easy to reach 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 people with your magazine article. And a magazine article is like, what, 1,000, 12, 1,500 words. And it's easier to put together. You learn about how to write for a particular audience, how to have a great title, how to have a good beginning, middle, and end, how to have a solid point to your article. All those kind of basic skills are things that you can develop and practice with a short piece of writing, as opposed to a big book that you're doing it with.
Well, and yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And at the end of your article, you can always say that you're the author of 10 publishing myths, and, you know, give people where the book is, and give them a chance to find out more about you. So it's a great promotional tool as well to do magazine pieces.
Well, and, you know, you bring up two interesting points, and I want to talk, number one, I'd love to talk a little bit more about how does someone actually get submitted to a magazine? You know, how do they do that? You know, if I'm deciding, all right, I want to start really doing this again, how do I get it published in the magazine? So that's question number one. All right. Question number two, and I'll give you a little bit background. So I'm here in Thailand, right? And quite frankly, sometimes there's not a lot of things to do. And so I do my podcast, and I decide, you know, I've really come to the point where I really want to write some meaningful things and make a difference. And so I thought, all right, I'm going to start writing a book. And I actually years ago took a course on how to write a book. And so, you know, I thought, okay, I'm going to try this. So I started writing some things and ended up with about, I would say maybe 10 to 12,000 words. Okay. And I contacted an editor because it's obviously I need some help on this. And my response from the editor was, I'm sorry, if you want to write a book, it's got to be at least 40 to 50,000 words. And I'm going, oh, crud. So, you know, I've started working on that again. I think I've gotten up to 20,000 words now. And I thought to myself, you know, what is it that I need to do? How do I need to write that many words? And now you're just talking about writing a magazine article, which still makes you an author, and so on and so forth. So the second question is, talk about the different levels of writing from the standpoint of volume of words, and where each one of those can effectively be marketed and be of value for people. But first of all, let's go to the magazine. How on earth do I get myself published in a magazine?
Well, you know, magazines make it pretty easy for you because they have guidelines. So look for the magazine guidelines that tell you what they're looking for as an editor. They'll tell you what different kinds of stories they want. And, you know, you're in Thailand. I'm sure you have some really interesting personal experiences that you have with your life over there. Yes. So personal experience stories are great. Many publications will take those. So, you know, look online for their guidelines. And that's really where they tell you what they want. And they may want a manuscript. They may want what they call a query letter, which is like a pitch letter, a one-page pitch letter that says, this is who I am, this is what I'm going to do, and this is when I'm going to send it to you. It's kind of got a little formula to it. You can learn how to write a query letter is one of the ways you get an assignment to write a magazine article. And once you write one magazine article, you can get another magazine article. So it's a building kind of thing. On the book front, one of the things that I would give you on that front is, particularly if it's nonfiction, those type of editors are really looking for a book proposal more than a book manuscript. And let me give you a big hint where you can learn to write a book proposal. I wrote a book called Book Proposals That Sell, 21 Secrets to Speed Your Success, really as a frustrated book editor because I wasn't getting the type of material from authors that I wanted. So I wrote this book. Now I got the revised edition of that book out there. So if people go to bookproposals.ws, you can get a free ebook version of my book. All you do is go over and put your email address in. You can get it in whatever format you want. Why in the world would I give away that book, Dr. Doug? I give it away in ebook because we've learned that if you get the ebook version of that book and start to read that ebook version, there's a high probability that you're going to turn and buy the print copy of the book. So giving away that ebook version, you really lose nothing as an author. We're really driving print book sales by giving away that ebook. And by doing that book proposal, you essentially build your business plan, whether you're going to self-publish, whether you're going to work with another publisher, however you're going to do it. That proposal says, who's my audience? Why am I writing this? What are the big pieces? What does this book compare to? What am I going to do to market the book? It's hard to write that proposal. There's a lot of work into writing that, but I've written 2 proposals that have gotten 6-figure advances from publishers. Now I have long stories about what actually happened to those books and how they didn't succeed in the market, but it really is possible if you start with a proposal rather than the manuscript.
All right. And so the second question, well, I go back to the magazines. Are there certain magazines that are more effective in publishing? So what are some of the magazines that an individual that's listening to this and says, all right, I want to do the magazine articles? Who are the magazines that they should be approaching? Or is it just kind of general local, or is it more national? What do they do?
I would go to the magazines that you personally take and that you read. And so, what magazines do you read? Are you a hobbyist? Do you read those magazines, or is there a news magazine that you read? Is there there's a lot of different kinds of magazines. So find the type of magazine that you can connect with, and you have some story, some connection to that magazine, and pitch them. So, years ago, I was a magazine editor at Billy Graham, the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. When we were producing a magazine, every issue we put out 1.8 million copies of that magazine, and we were looking for very specific kinds of personal experience stories about how people came to Jesus is what we were looking. But you'd be shocked at the inappropriate stories that people sent us all the time that, they'd never read the magazine. So they send some magazine about how to wash your dog or something like that. It's like, we wouldn't dare be interested in anything like that. So make sure you send the editor what he's looking for, and he tells you that in his guidelines. It's that simple.
Well, and so as you do that, and I'm thinking, and just a question and a statement maybe combined, is it valuable then to say, all right, so I want to write on personal development and really seeking to become who you really are. And so would it be good for me to Google that and say, what magazines would reflect that type of topic, and that way I would be able to identify some of the magazines that use those type of articles?
Sure, you could probably Google personal development magazines, personal development publications would be another way of looking at that, and find some magazines, and they change all the time. That's part of the reason. There are market guides, but get a current market guide. Don't use an old one, because the editors are always changing positions, and publications come and they go. So be aware. I always look online to see who that editor is, and are they still there, all that kind of thing.
Okay, so writing blogs, getting published in a magazine. Let's talk about that, climbing up the ladder type of thing. So, a blog or a magazine article, as you say, 1,000 words, 1,500 words. So someone that's able to write something that, say, is 10,000 words, where would they go? If they're able to do 20,000 words, where do they go? And obviously, if you get up to the 50 to 60,000 words, now you're talking about really focusing with a publisher and so forth. But what does someone do if they can come up with a 10,000 meaningful quote book?
If it's a 10,000 word book, it's probably something that they're going to self-publish and like on Amazon or something like that. It's not going to have a big readership. The problem with the whole self-publishing thing is that there's huge volume of material that's going out into the market every day. I mean, with the self-published material, there's over 11,000 new books that are published every day out there. So you have to do your work to, have a good title, have a good looking cover, make sure the interior looks good. Just all those kinds of little details are very important to make a good book at the end of the day.
All right. 20,000 words, or is there a difference?
There's not really a difference. 20,000 words is really more of a self-publishing effort, I would say, at the end of the day. Once you get in the 25, 30, 35, 40,000 word range, you're really in more of a visibility where maybe some publisher would be interested in what you're pitching.
Okay. So let's talk about your book. All right, let's talk about the myths. All right, and you were kind enough to send that to me, so I took a look at it. I got it a few days ago. So what I did is I actually wrote up here what your various chapters are, and I'm going to read each of your chapters, and then I want you to talk about at least one and maybe two that you think are going to be most important for someone to hear. So number one, will I make a lot of money writing my book? And you already approached that one. All right. Number two, my publisher will sell and promote my book. And you talked about that. Number three, writing a book will make me famous. All right. Number four, beginning writers have no chance to get published. All right. So there's another myth. Number five, I can't call myself a writer unless I publish a book. Number six, the editor will fix all my mistakes. Number seven, good writers are not born. Number eight, self-publishing is the best way to get my book out into the market. Number nine, my book will be a New York Times bestseller. And number 10, the life of a writer is glamorous. What are your favorite ones to talk about? Because we have about 10 minutes more to talk.
Well, I have covered that my, you're more than a writer if you write for magazines. So we kind of talked about that. Yeah. What I did at the end of every chapter, and I want people to understand this, that I gave practical actions that everybody can do to help them get the word out about their book out there. So that's part of why I had this, I call it a MBA, a myth buster action that they can actually take to be telling people about their book. So for example, I talk to authors all the time and they say, my connections are on Facebook, or my connections are on YouTube, or my connections are on LinkedIn. Well, those are all great platforms, don't get me wrong, but those are what we call in the business rented platforms, because I don't control any of those platforms. I could violate their terms tomorrow and I could get kicked off of them. So I encourage authors not to build their whole system overall on those places. So build your system on your own website, on your own blog, because you can send out your own newsletter, your own you take control of what you can take control of, I guess, and then you're not gonna be kicked off somewhere by accidentally violating their terms and ruining all the work that you've done in those places. So those are some huge steps that people do wrongly in this process, is what I'd say.
Okay, so good writers are born, not made.
Well, there's sort of a mixture there between we come with some innate talent, I think, some storytelling ability, but you can learn how to tell a good story, and I think there's a mixture in that. So, be reading books in your genre. For example, I met a guy at a writers' conference once that had written a romance novel, and I asked him if he read romances. And he said, no. He said, I'm writing romance. Well, he knew that romance was one of the biggest categories out there in the fiction area. So he just decided to write that because it was a big category. Well, that category has a system about how you tell those stories and how you put them together. You've got to be reading in that genre in order to be able to really, really figure that out and understand what the ways are to do that. When I put this book together, Dr. Doug, Alice Kreider, who endorsed the book from David C. Cook, told me, she said, Terry, you're missing the 11th myth. I'm like, okay, Alice, what's the 11th myth? She says, well, it should be that if I send my book to Oprah, she'll book me on her show. And I'm like, yeah, that's a pretty good myth. And so what I decided to do is I wrote that chapter and I give that away to people, the 11th myth. They can get that at terrylinks.com/11th myth /11 myth. And that'll bring them where they can get that for free from me. And I really want people to get my book too at the end of the day, Dr. Doug. So I set up this publishing. If they go to publishingoffer.com, they can get my book for only $10, includes the shipping, along with over $200 worth of bonuses. Publishingoffer.com is really the best place to do that.
Okay, and I'm going to include that in the description for you. Okay.
Thank you.
So again, I guess I get to, we talk about blogs, and again, hopefully my listeners, there's going to be a number of listeners that are going, you know what, I've never thought about writing a book, but I kind of want to write a book. So one of the things you talked about is, if we're talking fiction, now you're talking, different types of fiction, whether it's romance or adventure or whatever that happens to be. And then we get into nonfiction, where, then you get into the whole element, where I would be focusing because of my podcast, is that personal development and those type of things. And you talked about the fact that there's actually a formulation based on the topic and the area that you want to write. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit between fiction and nonfiction?
Yeah, with fiction, you really need to write the full book before you start sending it out. That's one of the things, because there have been people that can tell a great story and maybe they have a great beginning, but they really don't have the whole thing done. They don't know how to finish it. So that's a bad deal if you're a publisher and you've contracted with somebody that doesn't really, writes himself into a corner and doesn't really know how to finish their book. So with fiction, you have to write the whole thing. And with nonfiction, you can write part of it along with this book proposal that I was telling you about, and you could find a publisher doing that as well. So, and in the nonfiction world, we have this, if let's say you're a blogger, let's say you've written lots of blogs like I have. I did a book out of my blogs, actually, called Jumpstart Your Publishing Dreams. In the publishing world, we call that a book that you can do. So you can take your blog entries organize them into a chapter. I found out because I did it for my Jumpstart Your Publishing Dream book. It's a lot of work to do this, but you can take those entries, and because those are just random entries in the blog, right. But if you put them into a pattern, into chapters, they could be chapters of a book that you did. So that's another way that you can look at how to write your material and get it out there in the kind of volume that you need.
That's great. You know, it was interesting. I was on Facebook the other day, and probably because two questions I'm going to have. Number one, does it help to find someone to train you on how to write a book? Because there's a number of people that do that. And I don't know if that's something you do. It doesn't sound like that's something you do. But number two is, here was this whole thing, and it was about Amazon, but it was about AI Amazon. Learn how to write a book in a day. And so they're using AI. And I read an article about using Chat GPT and having them help you to write the book. Comment on that. What's your personal opinion on that? And is there some value in that, or is it ridiculous?
I think it's pretty obvious if a machine has helped you at this point. They're not that good, I don't think, of what they really turn out. They can help you on your research, on your analysis, on some of those kinds of things, but on the actual writing, I think you're better off doing that yourself, is my take on it.
Okay. And what about finding someone that actually talks about writing and actually has a 2 to 3 day course, weekend course or whatever, on how to write an effective book? What are your thoughts about those type of things?
I would look carefully at those to see what's the experience of that person, what's happened with their books. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors out there in that whole realm. So you have to be careful as far as who you really take instruction from, I guess is what I'd say at the end of the day.
So how does someone that would love to write and really share some of those personal experiences, or whatever that happens to be, and personal thoughts, how do they go about learning how to write a good book?
Well, one of the ways you learn, I think, is in the magazine area, because you can practice with a short piece. You can write on similar topics over and over. So if you write 12 magazine articles or 15 magazine articles and put those together, that can be a book. So it can lead you to the book area, but you can start and really learn the skill and craft of writing in the magazine area is what I recommend.
And as you talked about book proposals and so forth, is there a common guideline that says, all right, if you're going to write a nonfiction, here's kind of an outline of what you need to include in that to help someone to do that?
Yeah, that's what I would say my book Proposals That Sell does, is give you that overall outline and those different pieces that you would need to put together for that. It's a common tool that's used out there among literary agents and editors, is they're looking for a proposal.
So book proposal, you've written that. Remind the audience again how they would find that particular book.
They could get that free from me. Go to bookproposals.ws.website, bookproposals.ws, and that pulls up the cover of my book along with a button that says free book, and you can push that button and get that free from me.
Okay, fantastic. So as we close today, what would be a message that you would like to share with the audience for people who think, you know what, I really would love to write a little bit of my thoughts or my life or whatever that is. I'd love to write some type of quote book. What would be the message you'd share with them?
Well, The message I'd share, Doug, is that as writers, we face a lot of rejection. We hear the word no a lot, but I have been in like the top literary agencies and publishers in this country in New York. And when I visit with those people, every time they're asking me, where is the next Joel Osteen? Where's the next Left Behind? Where's the next best-selling book? So my message to your listeners is you may be getting no, they may be telling you that their client list is full. They may not even be answering you. You may be getting ghosted from those people, but realize that they are actually, all of them are reading their email. They're listening to their voicemail. They're looking at their physical mail that comes in because they're really looking for that diamond in the rough that they can take and bring into their publishing company and make a bestseller out of it.
All right. Well, Terry, thank you so much. This has been fascinating. Like I say, this is a topic that is not ever discussed on mine. So you're the main one here, but I appreciate it because I really think there's a lot of people that would love to be able to express their thoughts, their experiences in some type of written form. And as you say, whether it's a blog, whether it's a magazine article, whatever their purpose is and why they want to do it, I think makes a big difference too. So thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate it. I hope people will go to publishingoffer.com and get my book. That'd be great.
Ah, wonderful. And folks, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this. And for those of you that want to write something, listen to this over and over again and then get a hold of those books. I'm definitely going to do it. So thanks again and appreciate it. Hope you'll join us again soon. This is Dr. Doug saying namaste.